to my mic.
We have to try to.
So that wasn't just me?
No.
I will call to order the Wednesday, April 6th, 2022 meeting of the City of Falls Church Planning Commission. Is it Mr. Holland or Mr. Fuller? Mr. Holland, I guess. Will you please call the roll?
That'll be camera. Thank you.
Cameron's
It's all good.
okay. I can't keep track. I know Ms. Bazemore used to do it, and she's not here. So, all right.
We're jumping
So-
roll.
Mr. Garrish, you're going to be doing the roll, then go for it.
Chair Krasner,
I am here.
Vice Chair Stevens.
Here.
Ms. Teets,
Here.
Mr. Fuentes,
Here.
Ms. Weiss,
Here.
Mr. Hyra, and Ms. Comont.
Okay. And as I said, Mr. Hyra will probably be here late. Ms. Comont is a maybe, but we have a critical mass, so we'll get going. All right. I will read the required boilerplate. I know I say this every time, but I think at some point in the spring, we're going to get back in person. I've been talking to Mr. Stoddard about that. It could be in May, but we'll keep you guys posted. But for now, the meeting for which this agenda has been posted will be held pursuant to and in compliance with the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, Section 2.2-3708.2, and state and local legislation adopted to allow for continued government operation during the COVID-19 declared emergency. All participating members of the Planning Commission will be present at this meeting through electronic means, and all members of the public are welcome to view the meeting at our website, which is www.fallschurchva.gov/PC, and on Falls Church City Television, which is Cox Channel 11, RCN Channel 2, and Verizon Channel 35. Public comments are accepted virtually. Anyone who signs up to speak will do so via the meeting video platform. In order to do that, you would have completed a speaker form at our website, which is www.fallschurchva.gov/public comment, ideally before noon on the day of the meeting. And once you do that, you receive instructions via email on how to join the virtual meeting. Written comments are accepted. They're accepted in advance and in real time. If you're watching, you can send anything in at plan to our email address, which is plan@fallschurchva.gov until the end of the meeting. And if you do so, those are sent to us and summarized here at the meeting. Okay, so the first order of business is adoption of the agenda. I think, again, as laid out, it makes sense. I will say just at the outset, I know, there are people who signed up to speak on the action item. That item is going to be deferred. For anybody who is interested in the 1001 Lincoln Avenue subdivision, there will be no action taken on that tonight. There will be no discussion on that item tonight. There's been no new materials submitted as requested, which is why it was moved to tonight's date originally. There's been little communication with that applicant. It remains to be seen when and if that application will go forward. But when and if it does, it'll be re-advertised. The process will be restarted. But essentially tonight, it'll be placed, assuming we vote that way, it'll be placed on indefinite deferral, and which means essentially it's going to be put into sort of an inactive status. And if it's reactivated at some point in the future, it'll go through the proper public process. And anyone who is interested in contributing to that item or commenting on that item, rather, will be able to do so when and if it goes forward. But at this point, that remains to be seen. And so anyhow, I just wanted to put that out there. But otherwise, the order as it stands seems logical. So if there are no other comments or questions or concerns about that, I guess we need a motion to adopt the agenda.
Mr. Chair, I move we adopt the agenda for the Planning Commission meeting Wednesday, April 6, 2022.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Weiss. Any discussion? If not, then a roll call vote, please, Mr. Garris.
Chair Krasner,
Yes?
Vice Chair Stevens,
Yes.
Ms. Teets,
Yes.
Mr. Fuentes,
Yes.
Ms. Weiss.
Yes.
Okay. So we'll go ahead. There are no speakers tonight for the speaker series, which takes us to number 5, which is receipt of petitions for anything not on the agenda. I know we did receive a number of letters and emails for things on the agenda. Is there anything for items not on the agenda, Mr. Garris?
No.
Okay, just checking. Okay, so that brings us to action items. Number 6, letter A, which is again the 1001 Lincoln Avenue subdivision. And as I just mentioned, the recommendation for staff is to indefinitely defer this item. There's been no new submissions. There's been no new information. And so we're not going to go forward on this item at this time. And so, again, there's staff provided a motion, but again, as I said, there's no new information. All the attachments were the previous information, and there's no one representing the applicant, I don't believe, on the call. So there's no one on behalf of that applicant, the subdivision applicant, here at the meeting participating, and all that leads us to defer this item. And so I'll look for a motion to. Oops.
Mr. Fuller, you have your hand up, and I think we lost our.
Sorry, I'm back. I don't know. Apologies. I think I somehow knocked myself out of the meeting. All right,
Chairman,
Mr. Fuller.
yes, this item was continued from a previous public hearing. In other words, the public hearing was officially continued to this date.
That's right.
I would ask that you open it for any public comments.
Mr. Fuller, I appreciate that, but there's no new information, and therefore, to get into a discussion on a hypothetical application that may or may not go forward in this form or any other form, I don't think is a good use of the commission's time or the public's time, to be frank. At this point, there's nothing to comment on because there's really no application. And so when and if it comes back, again, there's no one here on behalf of the applicant. I don't think we can hold a public hearing without an applicant being present or the landowner being present. And there's no one from the land, as far as I know, there's no one here at the meeting on behalf of the landowner or the applicant. And so certainly without them here agreeing to that, I don't see how we could hold a public hearing considering those factors. So my recommendation is that we, again, defer this indefinitely. As the staff has said, I appreciate the public interest in this. The commission is certainly very interested in what may or may not happen on this lot, but at this point, it's questionable whether or not we even have an application. And with no one here from the applicant to confirm one way or the other, I don't think we can hold a public hearing in absentia. And so I'm going to I'm going to ask for a motion to defer this indefinitely as recommended by staff. And that's my recommendation. But again, if any commissioners have anything they'd like to add, please do. If not, if there's no other commission comments on this item, then I would again ask for a motion to, as recommended by staff, to indefinitely defer this to a potential future date. Ms. Weiss.
Thank you, Chair Krasner. I completely understand everything that you've just said. I guess I'm just wondering if there are any members of the public who decided to join tonight that haven't written comments in. Would you recommend that they?
I know there are some people from the public who are here, and again, I without an applicant here, I don't know if we can hold a public hearing without the landowner present in attendance, virtually or in any other way. And so, as of now, again, I don't know if we even have an application because there's no applicant here, and I don't believe we can hold a public hearing without the applicant. Maybe someone can correct me on that point. I don't know if I don't think we have the city attorney here, but I don't think we can hold a public hearing or continue the public hearing without the applicant being present.
I guess my question is, can there be comments in the absence of a hearing? And I mean, if the action item is a hearing, then maybe we can't do that. But maybe your advice to members of the public who are here for this evening.
I mean, my advice would be to stay tuned and follow. You know, if this is reactivated, there'll be new information. There'll be a new date. There'll be a new sign. There'll be new ads in the paper. There'll be new legal notices mailed out, and there'll be an opportunity to comment on what the application may or may not look like. It may look very different than what was proposed so far, or it may be not, or it may never come back. There's no way for us to know, and without anyone here representing the property owner, I don't want to speculate on what's going to happen. I have no personal knowledge, but again, I don't think we can hold a public hearing and take public comment on an item that, again, is being indefinitely deferred without, again, the applicant, him or herself, present in attendance at the meeting. Otherwise, it's not really a public hearing. You know, they don't have an opportunity to present information, answer questions, respond to citizen comment. I mean, we have all the written comment that'll remain in the record. And when and if it's reactivated, any of the written comment, again, will still be in the record, and folks will have an opportunity to provide updated comments on any changes if it is in fact reactivated. But at this point, I know staff has tried to reach out to this applicant leading up to this. This is not a unexpected development. Staff has heard I think crickets from this applicant, and so I don't know the current status of where this is. The applicant was I believe a contract purchaser at this property. I don't know, again, the status of that. So that's all I could say. So anyhow, so my recommendation is that we have to, we're almost forced to defer it, even if we wanted to hold the hearing without having the applicant here. I just don't think we can do it. And again, I appreciate folks signing up to speak and logging on, but I think that's kind of what we're presented with, given the situation. So, again, my recommendation is that we defer it as recommended and kind of move on. And if it comes back, we can pick it back up again. And there are a lot of issues I know related to what may or may not happen. I know we got some comments on some specific things, but I really, in my opinion, I don't think getting into a long discussion about some of those technical points on a hypothetical application is a good use of our time or the public's time. And so that's how I see it. Ms. Teets, I see your hand popped up.
Yeah, I just want to concur with you. Like, if we have not heard from the applicant and staff has reached out to the applicant and we've gotten, no information back, no status, no change, I don't, I hate to do that because I think that we definitely want to hear from the public, but without the applicant involved, I agree with you. I concur.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Teets. Mr. Stevens, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with deferring this, but I would hope that I guess would be for staff that we kind of figure out some way to give more advance notice so that the public would know, so that they don't just show up and then say, "Oh, sorry, it's it's canceled." I realize that was difficult not to do that, but at least I can express the hope that we can try to resolve these issues so that there's a little bit more advance notice. So I see Mr. Fuller has his hand up. I'm happy to defer to him, but otherwise I'm prepared to go ahead and move that we defer this.
Yes, I'm responding. Gary Fuller, Planning Deputy Director. I was responding to Commissioner Stevens' comment and to the previous chair's comments. This item will be noticed once we have a new application in the future. So letters that go out to adjacent property owners will occur again. We'll also post the sign on the property as required, and then we'll schedule it on your agenda for further action. So, all the normal things that happen to notice it will be repeated in the future. And if any public is watching and is not maybe in the immediate area, but is interested in following this, they can keep in touch with the Planning Commission agenda or call staff, and we'd be happy to keep them informed as to when this is rescheduled. So I just wanted to note that for any public watching that this will be restarted in effect, and there'll be an opportunity in the future. So thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Foley. I appreciate that. Right. So for anyone watching or interested in this item, you now know as much as we know, and which is not a lot as far as what the future of this case is going to be. As soon as anyone in the city knows more, the public will certainly be informed as required, and when and if this is taken up again, everyone will have all the proper notice to participate. So I appreciate that, Mr. Fuller. All right, Mr. Stevens, go ahead. I think you were starting to make a motion.
Sure, and thank you, Mr. Fuller, for your comments. And with that, I move that the Planning Commission defer final action on the preliminary and final plat approval of subdivision application number 2021-1106 to subdivide 1001 Lincoln Avenue, RPC 51215058 to a future undetermined date, which allows for the applicant to resubmit their application and allow for adequate staff review before scheduling a new public hearing date.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Puentes. Any discussion on the motion? All right, so we have a motion and a second to indefinitely defer this item. We have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Garris.
Chair Krasner,
Yes.
Vice Chair Stevens,
Yes.
Ms. Teets,
Yes.
Mr. Puentes,
Yes.
Ms. Weiss.
Yes.
Great. That's approved. And so this application for the 1001 Lincoln Avenue subdivision is indefinitely deferred. Thank you. Okay. Moving right along. That brings us up to item 6B, which are the PC minutes of March the 2nd of this year. Does anyone have any comments, edits, corrections on those minutes? If not, then I would look for a motion to adopt the minutes.
Chairman, I move that we adopt the planning commission meeting minutes of Wednesday, March 2nd.
Thank you, Mr. Puentes. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Stevens. Any discussion? If not, then a roll call vote, please. Mr. Garris.
Chair Krasner,
Yes?
Vice Chair Stevens,
Yes.
Ms. Teets.
Yep.
I have lost.
So we lose Ms. Teets?
You're muted, I believe, although I don't see your video either. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yes. I couldn't get my cursor to work.
Mr. Puentes,
Yes.
Ms. Weiss,
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so the March 2nd minutes are approved, which takes us to item 6C, which are the March 16th minutes of this year. I was not at this meeting. I'll have to abstain from this, but does anyone have any edits, comments, or corrections on the March 16th minutes, which are, by the way, Mr. Stevens, as I heard from Mr. Stoddard and others, did a great job handling what is, sometimes can be a long and technical meeting that covers a lot of different topics, which, for the CIP. So I appreciate Mr. Stevens stepping up and chairing that meeting. But are there any comments or corrections to the minutes? If not, then we will look for a motion to adopt those minutes.
I move that we adopt the minutes of March 16, 2022.
Thank you, Ms. Eads.
Second.
Second by Ms. Wise. Any discussion? Then, if not, then a roll call vote. Mr. Garris? We're losing everybody tonight? There we go. He's still
Chair
here.
Krasner,
I'll have to abstain.
Vice Chair Stevens,
Yes.
Ms. Teets,
Yes.
Mr. Puentes,
Yes.
Ms. Weiss.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So those minutes are adopted for posterity. Okay, so we're making great progress here. We're all the way now at item 7, letter A, which is a work session to discuss the Park Avenue Great Streets. And I believe we have Mr. Astorgas here. I don't know, Mr. Fuller, were you going to introduce this item first?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. I will introduce this item and then they'll have a presentation that follows.
Great. Take it away.
All right. Thank you for this opportunity to be before the commission. CIP projects are a charter responsibility of the Planning Commission. And one of the things we've implemented in recent years is to come before you with those projects that the Planning Commission has made recommendations on to council. And at this point, what we wanted to do is bring forward this project for the Park Avenue Great Streets at a 30% design review. And that would lead to 60% plans and 90% plans. And then we would look to bring those back to you at, when they're 90 to 100%. And then the start of construction for this particular project is scheduled for October 2025. And so at this point, the onboarding of the consultant has begun, and the 30% plans are available. So this has been a project that's been nearly 10 years in the making. Started off in 2014 with the downtown area plan, and then there's been a number of developments and studies and reports in terms of comprehensive planning, CIP work that have happened since then. They're outlined in your staff report. The project is funded at a little more than $10 million, staff engineering construction. And the project generally, so for the public, they understand it. The project delivers on the city's adopted policies and making Park Avenue one of the civic great streets by widening sidewalks, planting street trees, installing benches, bike racks, undergrounding overhead utility lines, and connecting design of the street with the surrounding civic and commercial buildings. And so tonight we have the project manager from the city. It's Al Astorga. He's the CIP project manager with the city. And then we have from Volker Inc., consulting engineers, project manager Ty Lee, and the lead designer Oliver Awesome. And then they will be providing a brief presentation. Cameron will handle the slides for them. So I'm going to turn that over to them, and we'll present this project. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for inviting us in front of the commission. My name is Ty Lee. I am the roadway project manager for Park Avenue. With me tonight is Oliver Boom. He's our project manager for the aesthetic portion, the landscape architecture portion of this project. You'll be hearing from him real shortly. I'm going to be talking about some of the engineering upgrades to the project, and then he'll come in and show you the aesthetic portion. I will be going over the engineering aspects. Oh, I'm sorry. Next slide, please. Next slide. That was just discussed. To give you an overall view of the project, this project is funded by two different funding sources through the state. We have the Park Avenue portion of the project, which extends from Virginia Avenue down to Washington Street. And then a separate funding source will construct Little Falls and Maple Avenue between Broad and Park Avenue. This is an overall view showing you the project and its relationship to the surrounding area. And you'll note that at each end of the project, we are going to be talking, and Oliver will go into this in a little bit more detail, some of our gateway treatments that we're proposing. Next slide, please. And this is just a zoomed in view. There are two potential additions to the project that we're in talks with the city now. One is Park Place, extending the project down North Washington to Park Place a little bit to help coordinate the new development for that corner into the project. And also we've been asked to look at developing a master plan for a plaza in front of the city municipal building. So with that, next slide, please. So to talk about some of the engineering aspects real quickly, the picture on your left, that's the intersection with Virginia Avenue. That's the new library in the background. We'll be looking at to ensure adequate and safe access, make sure it's provided throughout the corridor as appropriate, not only for pedestrians, but we'll also be upgrading driveway entrances as well. Obviously, the objective would be to get rid of the safety cones. The picture on the right, this is the intersection at Little Falls. Now what we're proposing here is to eliminate this signal, create a four-way stop condition. And we're also proposing upgrading to a raised intersection. This will help promote slower speeds through the corridor and provide additional safety. And Oliver will show you some photographs and talk more about that in just a minute. Next slide, please. The intersection, the picture on the left is the intersection of North Maple. Again, we're proposing improvements at this intersection as well in an effort to reduce the lengths of the crosswalks, making it safer and easier to cross the road in this area. Now, in both of these pictures, you'll notice the on-street parking in the corridor. And our current plan maintains on-street parking. Today, there are currently 79 spaces out there, and our plan proposes 80 spaces, so a net gain of 1 space. In the picture on the right, you also see the utilities along the roadway. This plan will address placing all the overhead utilities underground. Now, we're at a 30% completion stage with the plan, so the actual location has yet to be determined. But all the decisions that we make related to the project incorporate the undergrounding aspect as well. Next slide, please. With any roadway project, stormwater runoff is always an issue. We're aware of some minor issues in the area of the Kaiser Medical Facility, and our team will be addressing all the stormwater issues within the entire corridor as we further develop the plans. And what you can't see in any of these pictures is that there are currently bicycle sharrows along Park Avenue. And it's our intention to reinstall these pavement markings at the completion of the paving to continue to encourage multi-mobility through the corridor. We've also included wide sidewalks on both sides of the roadway for the pedestrian access in our proposal as well. And lastly, on the picture on the right, that's the intersection with Washington. The existing signal shown there will be maintained and upgraded as needed. But we also feel like this is a location that has the opportunity to create a gateway for Park Avenue, and really to talk about more of those type of proposals and the aesthetic upgrades is Oliver. Oliver?
Next slide, please. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. So this is the overall proposal plan for the project. As Ty mentioned, this is a complete reconstruction of the sidewalks, bulb outs on the roadway throughout the corridor, especially at the intersections. We have east and west gateways along Park Avenue, and we have the connection to Broad Street. Both Little Falls and Maple are very important connections between Broadway and Park Avenue. As we move forward in the slideshow, I'm going to close up to each one of these intersections so you get a much better idea of what the details are. But in this slide, I want to pay attention to the farmers market. So in the yellow area next to City Hall is where the existing farmers market is. It's our intention to move the farmers market to Park Avenue, and for Park Avenue to be temporarily closed on Saturday mornings for the farmers market, and that you can see that in the orange area. The area can also be used for some other activities like parades and some kind of other special events that I know you have. Next slide, please. So I'm going to make my way from west to east. This is the intersection of North Virginia and Park Avenue. As Ty mentioned, we have a raised intersection here. Not only do we have a raised intersection, but we also have bulb outs. And the combination of the two really emphasize the pedestrian. We want to promote pedestrian activity, pedestrian safety, slowing down cars. This is an area where we have a library, a park. We're going to, you can get close from the park. You can go to City Hall. So we really want to improve the connectivity here. Obviously, we have issues of safety. So we have the bulb out, bollards that we need to introduce, and they don't necessarily have to be bollards, and we can talk about it in a minute. But can we go to the next slide, please? So we understand Park Avenue is very important. It's not just a roadway, and it's not just a streetscape. It's a very special place where you can have parades. As we mentioned, hopefully we can move the farmers market here, and there can be some other special events as well. In a minute, I'm going to talk a little bit about the detail on what we intend to do on this segment of Park Avenue, which is going to be the farmers market. And it's, if we can go to the next slide, please. But before I do that, I do want to mention, I talked about the bollards. There's a lot of opportunities here to integrate art into the streetscape design. What exactly that will look like, but we don't know. That's part of the design process. We would like to find opportunities, or create opportunities where we get feedback from the public or from other stakeholders. And I'm hoping that after the presentation, we can talk a little bit about that, have a discussion about that. Next slide, please. This is a typical section for that segment of roadway on Park Avenue where the farmers market is going to be. And if you can take a look at the section on the upper section where the curb is next to the bollard, that is a flush condition, which would allow people during the farmers market to be able to move unobstructedly 360 degrees throughout the area. So what we're trying to do here is create really a pedestrian open space during those special events. Next slide, please. And here's a rendering of that segment of of Park Avenue. This is a regular day event where the roadway is a roadway with parking, and we need to be very careful about safety, again, pedestrian safety, and that's why you have those bollards there. Exactly how we're going to do it yet to be determined, but because it is a flush condition, you know, we don't want cars to be able to encroach onto the sidewalk. Next slide, please. So this is the condition during the farmers market that we foresee. Again, universal access for pedestrians as they, you know, approach the curb, so that in a perpendicular fashion, so they can are unobstructed. It's an ADA compliance issue as well, and safety. These tents are drawn about 10 by 10, and if they're bunched a little bit closer together, I think the maximum number of stalls that we could have here is about 100, close to 100 stalls. Next slide, please. So this is the intersection of Little Falls. It is also a raised intersection. As Ty mentioned, we're removing the traffic signals. The intersection also has bulb outs, so here we are creating much more pedestrian friendly, but also creating a lot of space for gathering areas. They could be informal seating areas. We have a couple of benches shown at the upper left-hand corner, but there are definitely opportunities throughout this intersection for seating areas. Next slide, please. Yeah, all of these sidewalks are brick. The intersections are brick. We want to maintain a uniformity in the streetscape design using standard furnishings, but we also want to explore opportunities for some uniqueness of space in specified areas and strategically located areas, like the intersection that I mentioned where we could introduce artwork. Next slide, please. This is the intersection of Maple Street, and this is the existing condition, which I wanted to show you because of the, as I'm sure you know, the area has very long crosswalks, I would say it's somewhat dangerous, you know, for a pedestrian to cross the street. If you can go to the next slide, just a little before and after, so you can see the difference. So what we've done, roadway geometry, we've extended the bulb out as much as we can. I do want to emphasize the fact that we are planting 40 new trees on the project area, and we're trying to save as many of the existing trees as possible. In this particular location, we took the previous design and made slight adjustments so that we can save the 3 large trees that are in the parking lot on the left of Maple Street on this plan. So we do understand, and I hope people understand, that some trees may have to be sacrificed because we are undergrounding the utilities, the overhead utilities. We're going to underground them, and they can damage the root systems of these trees. But we are going to try do everything possible to, if we have to dig trenches, to have those be as far from the root trees as possible. Next slide, please. Actually, can we go back to the previous one? Because I want to talk a little bit about something that we've already talked about, but here it's very easy to see the extensive bulb outs, not only at the intersections, but also by the driveways. And the driveways are for the most part, they're going to be raised driveways so that the sidewalk, so pedestrians, as they walk down the sidewalk, they don't have to go down to driveway level. They're going to be at the same level. And I think that's a very important thing to understand here. Next slide, please. And finally, to the East Gateway, we have a raised crosswalk on Park Avenue. North Washington Street is a very busy street, so we couldn't raise that entire intersection. But the raised crosswalk will create a gateway. It will slow down cars as they make the turn from North Washington to Park Avenue. We're also looking to remove the Brontosaurus traffic signals that you see in front of the theater. We're going to replace those with more urban traffic signal poles. And there, as Ty mentioned, there's going to be some coordination that we're going to have to do on the Park Place intersection when that change order comes in. Next slide, please. So again, this is there's some opportunities here for artwork. Again, we don't know exactly what it's going to look like. If you can remove that, can you guys see the box? The box is blocking the gateway element that we proposed. But regardless, what's important here with these gateway elements is that we want to make these visible from a driver's perspective, but also have them be interesting for a pedestrian as they walk by these gateways. Gateway art structures. Next slide, please. And again, we don't know exactly what they look like. Is okay. We don't know exactly what they look like, but we want them to be colorful, vibrant, inviting. We want to welcome people to Park Avenue. This is a great street, so we want to make a statement for Falls Church as people visit Falls Church. Next slide, please. And then finally, the connections to Broad Street are also very important. Not as much of a gateway element because we wanted to emphasize the two east-west gateways, but they're very important for people to be able to walk from Broad Street to Park Avenue. We are tightening the curb radii. We're making ADA improvements. The crosswalks will be brick, and in some cases, we actually may be narrowing the roadway a little bit with a bulb out. Next slide, and I think that's the end of the slideshow.
Okay, thank you for that. I guess let's see. I guess we'll open it up for commissioners to provide some feedback. I know we have some members of the public here, and normally it's a work session, and we wouldn't necessarily, take formal public comment. But because I know we have a few folks that are here, maybe after the commissioners are done, since you've come out tonight and logged in, we may allow some time for some public comment. But to start off, do any commissioners have anything they'd like to comment on? Anyone? Let's see, there's a hand I'm just not seeing. There we go. Mr. Stevens, your hand is up. Why don't you go ahead?
Tried to encourage somebody else to go before me, but I'm happy to go ahead. I have questions and comments, so I'm not sure exactly the best way to do this, so I'll kind of rope along here and see how it goes. First of all, kind of a high level, I'd very much like to, this is an important project, and I'd very much like to see the issues that are open get resolved as expeditiously as possible so that we can move ahead to construction. I went back and looked at the Planning Commission recording from this March 2015, 7 years ago, and there were a lot of elements there that have been introduced and have continued on to today. So, there's a lot of things that were in people's minds back then that have just taken us a long time to work through all the details, get funding and so forth. But what really jumps out is that the estimate at that point was 3.5 million, and now we're up to 10.5 million in 7 years. So the delay is clearly has a lot of negatives associated with it. Just curious to begin with on what the thinking was behind moving the farmers market. I kind of like the idea, but it just seems like a rather new issue. So I think it would help to know what the thinking behind that was, if anybody knows on staff or any of the fellow commissioners.
This is Alice Storga, with the city project manager of this project. The farmers market currently is in the parking lot of the city hall, and it is crowded and it takes up a lot of parking. The idea is by moving this to the street, it would free up parking for folks at the farmers market as well as the recreation center, and it would make this a destination site for the street. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that helps. Like I say, I think it's a good idea. It's just this came so quickly. I'd never seen it before. Maybe others have been familiar with these discussions, but so I just think it deserves some airing out, especially for the community. It also strikes me that one of the institutions that will be concerned about Farmers Market Island Park Avenue is the library. Their reliance is on street parking, and of course that'll be taken away during the farmers market. So it could be that the parking now that I understand it, that the city parking lot could be also used for patrons of the library. It's not exactly convenient there, but people do that in urban areas increasingly. We walk a couple of blocks to your destination, so at least there would be an alternative there if this is the direction that we proceed on. One of the things that also jumps out to me and others, I'm sure, is the whole issue of biking. And if we go back to the application that was made in 2019, there were a lot of references to biking and the city's master bike plan and the fact that the Great Streets project could tie into existing and planned bike lanes in the future. And we didn't see that much about biking in this proposal. So it strikes me that it would be helpful on future iterations to go back and rethink this issue. I think what's going to be required here to make this work, just my own view at the moment, is that it's going to be very difficult in terms of the very limited space that exists on Park Avenue to carve out a bike lane, even though that would be the gold star as far as a solution. So we're going to have to live with some kind of a shared arrangement here, I believe. However, to make that work, especially to make people feel safe for biking, it's really going to be key to get the speeds down and to try to limit the use of Park Avenue as it has been used in the past, which is an alternative to Broad Street. People, take what they perceive to be an easier route on Park Place to avoid stoplights and congestion on Broad Street. And that's understandable, but that's not the sort of thing that we want to achieve a good urban place here in the city. So I think really finding ways to discourage cut-through traffic and to slow down traffic, that's going to be very key to helping to promote much more widespread biking than perhaps what was envisioned at this particular iteration of the plan. And I think Commissioner Comont had some ideas in that regard too that I very much endorse. I was looking at the staff comments, and just as a side note, I'd recommend in the future that we put dates on these. There's no dates on when these comments from staff were made, so it's a little hard to interpret them, but in terms of the context. But there was one by Mr. Bradley that I was particularly interested to understand a little bit better. He was talking about he would like the street to be labeled as a flush mount curb and not a shared street. He says he doesn't think there's enough going on to call it a shared street. And I'm just curious what all of that discussion was about. I don't know if staff can give a quick reply to that.
The answer is basically that well, with a flush mount curb, you can distinguish it allows separation by, as Oliver was talking about, with the bollards from traffic, as opposed to if it were just no division between the sidewalk and the street. It would create a much more difficult situation for the pedestrians, and so it was the issue of having a curb and separate the sidewalk from the street versus having a flat sidewalk with something dividing the street from the curb.
Okay, so that's really that whole issue of traditional curb and gutter versus flush curb with valley gutter.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. Well, I very much support the approach of going with a flush curb and a valley gutter. It strikes me that that could also be part of the strategy to slow traffic down. I think when people don't see just a traditional curb, they see a flat surface. It tends to signal that there's a lot more going on this street and that slower speeds are what's required. So I guess I would throw in my support for that approach. I agree with closing off the entrance to the parking spaces just off of Park and Maple, and also removing the signal at Park and Little Falls. Those both seem to be very positive steps in the right direction. I think those are the main things. I wasn't sure what these bollards, the concrete ones near the library, I wasn't quite sure what the purpose of those are. It almost strikes me that it could be introducing a hazard there. If we do have the flush curbs, which encourages people to kind of meander a bit in, beyond where they normally would, then you have these bollards. I'm just curious, have those been used any other place? And if so, could you point those out to us so that at least we could maybe take a look at it and just see what kind of experience people have had with those? It's something new to me anyway. Let's see, undergrounding of utility poles. I'm glad one of the staff comments pointed out the importance of doing that there on Park Place next to Clarendon's. That was an issue that came up as we reviewed the Broad and Washington project, and it seemed to be kind of a surprise to everyone that there were a couple of utility poles there that weren't going to be removed. So at last evening's EDA meeting, I believe it was City Manager Shields indicated that those poles would be coming down. So it would be good to confirm that. If that's part of this project, I think that would be a very outstanding outcome. And also just to be careful on all the utility poles along Park Place so we don't get surprised later on in thinking that particular poles are going to be removed. And in fact, they might not. So that's something I think experience from the Broad and Washington project suggests that would be good to be careful about. I certainly agree with all of the raised crossings. The one near the library, it looks like an excellent idea to me, as well as the other raised crossings. I think these are all very good things to help slow down traffic. So I guess that's it for the moment. I'm very interested in my fellow commissioner comments, but I see a lot of positive things here. And again, I hope we can resolve these and move ahead with this project.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. I don't know, if the consultant team wants to maybe comment, respond now or maybe at the end if they have anything to kind of add it. But this is more of a dialogue. So if folks on the other side want to, if the consultants want to comment or anything or answer any questions that are raised, feel free to jump in there. Mr. Puentes, your hand is up, so why don't you go ahead?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. This is great. It's really great. I like a lot of this. This is just the kind of project I'd love to see much more of. Of course, we get greedy now. We want this to proliferate everywhere. I do remember years ago, someone talking about turning Park Avenue into a one-way street going this way and Broad Street, one-way street going that way. And these are crazy ideas. I'm so glad that we moved well beyond that for the stuff we're talking about here today. I like the bump outs a lot. I like what you've done to re-engineer Maple. Park Avenue is particularly a bad intersection. The one comment I have though is about the bike infrastructure. Like, I suspect that the concern is that there's no way to fit in a dedicated, separated bike lane. I'd like to hear discussion around that. It seems to make perfect sense here. I am not allergic to taking away roadway space for cars if there's any way that we can squeeze in bike lane here. One of the slides, the bike strip slide with the fence on, seems to indicate that there was some kind of bike lane, but I really want to see that here. Sharrows are terrible. Many bikers are waiting.
Can I just interrupt for a second, just to let Mr. Puentes know that his audio, at least on my end, isn't great, and I want to make sure that we all hear his comments.
Sorry. I'll talk louder. Does that help?
That helps a little bit. Yeah, it was a little soft, but yeah, that's better.
Sorry. Would like to see dedicated separated bike lanes instead of the Sharrows. But I strongly feel that that's something that could be here. My question though is to staff, I guess, is around the VDOT comments. They're pretty indecipherable for me. I just wonder if you summarize what VDOT is concerned about, and is there anything in the plan as presented here that VDOT would object to, potentially could be problematic for the project?
Actually, does VDOT have? I know VDOT obviously has something to say about Broad Street and Washington Street, but does VDOT have something to say about Park Avenue in a formal capacity? I'm just curious too about the process, about why we got a bunch of VDOT comments on a city maintained street. Maybe, and again, maybe I'm just missing something. Could someone on staff or the consultant team maybe respond to that?
Yes, sir. This is Ty Lee again with Volkert. It's due to the funding. Funding is coming from the state. So they do have an oversight to the development of the plans. However, as you say, it's a city maintained roadway. Basically, Falls Church has the final say, or should have the final say on certain issues.
That's what I would think. I mean, ultimately, I know VDOT, they're looking to make sure, I guess, the grant money is used appropriately, but, ultimately, right, I think.
That is absolutely correct.
Yeah, to the extent there was any sort of philosophical disagreement, yeah, I think we would get the final.
That's correct, but they also will ensure that the standards are met.
Sure, right.
So
right. Does that help, Mr. Puentes?
It does. I'm be here for some interpretation of what their concerns or comments were. Again, it was just very difficult to understand.
It was written in like extreme transportation engineer speak. Yeah, which if you don't speak that, yeah, which honestly I'm not fluent in that. I just kind of passing conversationalist in that. But it's a little bit hard to decipher. I don't know if staff or the consultant team were there any of those comments that were significant? I mean, that was, from significant, deficiency or issue that they called out that required a change or would require a major change. I mean, I didn't see anything like that, but maybe someone else, could pick up on something that I missed.
At this time, sir, we are still going through the comments and coordinating with Al Astorga on those comments.
Okay.
Once we do that, if you'd like, I'm sure we can work with Al to generate kind of an overview if you would prefer.
Yeah, I think just if there was anything significant that VDOT objected to or, was trying to or had a concern with, that might require, some alterations to the plan in a significant way, I think is what Mr. Puentes was getting at. But no, that's fine if you haven't gone through them all yet. Are you done, Mr. Puentes? You have other things you want to?
I would like to, some dialogue about the potential for dedicated bike infrastructure here. The applicant or somebody was that considered? Is there space for it? there anything we can do about that?
Al, if you would like, I can start the conversation a little bit. Right now, sir, there's just, with the on-street parking, there's not enough space without acquiring additional right-of-way, impacting parking lots and the like. We have attempted with the raised intersections and the bulb outs. They act as traffic calming measures, even though they're not technically traffic calming measures. When people drive and you see a bulb out coming, you're going to slow down. It's a very constrained area. Having said that, we can absolutely take another quick look to just make sure that we don't feel that it would be, I mean, sometimes even adding the lane, if it's still in a confined space, really doesn't make it too much safer, you know.
And we'd also like to know if there's any kind of consideration for maybe having parking not on one side of the street and having, you know, just other kind of configurations than the traditional 2 lanes of parking, 2 lanes of roadway, and then anything else just isn't going to fit. There's an opportunity to do something here different. Sorry about that.
No, I apologize for interrupting. One thing to bear in mind is some of this funding that has been received for this project was done so through grant applications that specified a certain scope of services. If you change that scope, then there may be implications to the funding source, whereas the project has to be rescored and, you know, not that the project would lose money, but that possibility would exist. So we're kind of dealing with issues that were derived several years ago and trying to come up with the best solution possible.
Thank you.
Sir, could I add, this is Alice Storga again. I do want to add that because of Park Avenue being a place where the businesses along Park Avenue rely on parking on the street, that has also put a sort of a demand on us not to eliminate any parking. So it's a tough one.
Okay. Any other commissioners have comments they wanted to make? Ms. Weiss, your hand just popped up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I saw Mr. Puentes shaking his head at that, and I wanted to support the head shaking. If Park Avenue is to be a great street, I think we want it to reflect all of the values that we have been enshrining in our comprehensive plan, including the vision statement and a lot of the recent conversations that we've been having, not just recent, but over the years about, you know, decreasing the need for transportation by cars and increasing pedestrian friendliness and bikeability and just, you know, reducing climate, you know, greenhouse gas emissions by relying on cars. So I hope that maybe with, I don't know anything about scoring. I understand that funding source matters, but I would hope that staff would start to think about how to integrate these values. So that's sort of a spur of the moment comment based on the head shaking there. And I also wanted to sort of align myself with Mr. Stevens' comments and, you know, Ms. Comont's comments as well, and certainly rely on my colleagues' expertise and thought in these areas. I guess two comments, or one comment and one question. You know, with respect to sort of thinking about how Park Avenue as a great street can be a great reflection of our values. I'm wondering, you know, we've been talking about green infrastructure and public art, and it seems like there's opportunities to incorporate both in this project, particularly green infrastructure as public art, and a way to engage people. I'm just looking at all those bulb outs and the interesting gateways you're proposing. So I guess the question to staff or anybody from Volcker, you know, is there thinking about kind of green infrastructure and how we might use landscaping and rain gardens and, to make this both beautiful and capture stormwater, or is that too soon? I don't really understand the 30% versus 60%, et cetera, process. And and my question, and this is maybe more for staff, is, recognizing that we have, new development all the way out to west, and we want to kind of build that connectivity from west to Washington Street. What is the thinking? I recognize the context of this particular project is limited, but what is the thinking in terms of connectivity along Park all the way to west? And building that greatness. Obviously, it already connects. There's sidewalks you can walk. It's easy to get from point A to point B. But I'm just thinking we'll have a really beautiful, shiny new project on one end of the street, and what happens on the other.
I hate to put Gary on the spot, but this project is limited from Virginia Avenue to Washington. Gary, is there any thought of anything expanding Park Avenue beyond the Virginia Avenue?
Yes, I'm not real familiar with all the plans. That's a good question, but I do know the vision is to establish a great street that is beyond just the scope of this project. So I would say that yes, there's community planning efforts and visions that look at that concept. So I would say maybe that would be something that we should revisit as staff, and be able to kind of look at the big picture. That's what planning's all about. So let's just instead of me reporting on that without the information, let's take a look at that, and then we can report back on that. Thanks.
That would be great. And what triggered that was me looking at that very nice looking sort of plaza in Virginia. And I think it's really nice. But then we have a whole other section of that street that people walk on, and more people will be walking down to the Founders Row. And it almost feels like it's beautiful and new until that plaza on Virginia, and then it's forgotten, right? And it's the old infrastructure. So it'd be great to kind of think about how that all connects. So that sounds like a great next step, Mr. Fuller. I'm just wondering if there's any thought on green infrastructure.
I can try to respond to that, Al. Cameron, can you put the slideshow back on? The visuals are always helpful.
Sure thing.
Let's see, slide. So you also mentioned artwork, and I wanted to have a little discussion on art. But if you can go to, it would be the intersection of Maple. Slide 18, I think. Yeah, this one here. So when it comes to green infrastructure, we have these bulb outs, but the problem is that the sidewalk is what we call a curb abutted sidewalk along Park Avenue. What that means is that the curb and the sidewalk are next to each other. And so you're limited. So when that happens, you don't have a green space to put a bioretention, what we call a bioretention planter. The place where we identify that is possible is the corner of Park Avenue and Maple, the north. Well, the one on the right side here, yeah, north is up. So the northeast corner. I probably can't request control here, but if you can see the little green space at the intersection, the way that the water runs down the hill is basically from the top, from the north down to the intersection, right? The issue is that it's not a very large drainage area, so not a lot of water would be captured in a bioretention cell there. We had it at one point at the conceptual design, and then we removed it at 30%. That's not to say that's too late to put it back in. I mean, if we want to make a change, this is the time to do it. The other issue that you always run into when we design these green infrastructure facilities is maintenance. But it seems to me that I'm sure there's a volunteer group who would we welcome the ability to maintain one of these facilities, and that would involve planting, mulching, picking up trash, beautifying the landscape. When the other issue we have is we have a lot of very large trees, existing trees. So, these bioretention cells, you have to dig in 3 to 4 feet. And if you do that too close to an existing tree, you run the risk of damaging the tree. So obviously that's not what we want to do. So this is an area that's possible. We could look into that. The other thing you brought is artwork. And if we could go to slide, and I'm going to try to address one of the comments from Mr. Stevens, slide 9 at the intersection of where the library is. So this is an interesting situation. Yes, we're making spaces more pedestrian friendly. We're emphasizing pedestrian use. We're slowing down cars, but it's you still have conflict. It's inevitably when pedestrians and vehicles and bicyclists, when they share a space, there's a potential for an accident. So, and now we're actually putting cars at the same level as the sidewalk. So we really need to create what we call these behavior indicators. Behavior indicators can be furnishings, can be light pole, it can be bollards, could be some other object in the streetscape to inform drivers that they need to be aware of some other user in the public realm. I think these are great opportunities for artwork. Right now, which is showing a white block, concrete, but I think these are great opportunities. I hear you talking about the values of the community. One of my ideas would be, for us to have a table at the farmers market and just ask people, what are your, sort of like a design charrette or a little workshop, have kids be involved in arts and craft and talk about values of the community. And then perhaps we can put these values in mosaic or some kind of artwork on these objects that are part of the streetscape, that are next to the library, that are next to the park, really make it at the human scale artwork, something that kids could touch and have vibrant colors. I mean, the options are endless, right? But to answer your question, why do we have bollards there? It is really a form of protecting pedestrians from cars encroaching onto the sidewalk. And so something similar could happen at the other end, the gateway. There are less bollards because it's not a raced intersection, it's a raced crosswalk. We talked about, can we go to the other slide? I think it's slide 20. Yeah, this one. This is fine. Here we're showing typical bollards, but it doesn't mean that there have to be those type of bollards. But here we have a gateway that is maybe 15 feet high. It's a much larger object that people driving down Washington Street at a certain speed can also see. They may not be making the turn, but they're driving by, and we want people to know, hey, this is a great street. This is Park Avenue. Go park your car and come walk over here. Again, I don't know what that's going to look like. I think the next slide has some alternatives, some options from other places. Again, something I would love to have a table at the farmers market, or if we have a public meeting, have design charrettes, have ideas thrown at the team, and have people come up with thoughts on paper, and we can translate those things too. Part of our scale is to be facilitators for people who may not have the artistic ability, just help them with ideas. So hopefully that answered your questions. Or maybe you have more questions.
Okay. Ms. Teets, why don't you go ahead?
Yes, I think most of the comments I had have already been given by various different planning commissioners. But I do want to say I do prefer the curbless design. I like it where we don't have the curbless because I think it does kind of blend the purpose a little bit more. But, you know, then I see the ballers and I realize, like, as much as we want this to be truly multimodal and very pedestrian friendly, you know, we all are having to deal with these cars. And I do think that we should consider lowering the speed limit on this street. So maybe to 15. People shouldn't be driving fast on this road right now. I know it's very difficult to cross that Maple and Park intersection, like to go to Northside Social, or, I mean, it's a little scary. So the bump outs, all of those things are really, really great. And I'd love to see a better crosswalk for Kaiser, a better crosswalk to get to State. I think all those things would encourage more people to walk. But so in general, I mean, I really like this plan. I know in the past when we've talked about this, we have talked about moving past Virginia. I think it's just basically we're trying to get one section done to just showcase what it could be. And then, you know, we obviously want to move it all the way down to Founders Road. That it makes the most sense. I kind of wish, in a way, we could actually close permanently the part where the farmers market would be. It would be nice to have a pedestrian mall area there permanently, but I think it's kind of hard to do because we don't have the businesses there that we normally would support something like that. Like if you go to downtown Charlottesville or Winchester, Virginia, they all have like streets they've closed, but they have, you know, a lot of bar and restaurants along it. But I think that's an interesting concept in the future. It would be really fun to have a street we could close. We can't really close Broad or Washington, that we could have restaurants and bars right off of it and have it more interactive. But, you know, and maybe that's something that could happen in the future, as, you know, there's a lot of small houses along Park further down there used as businesses right now. And so something, it would be more interactive businesses might be really cool. The big thing I wanted to talk about that I don't think has been brought up, you know, I was looking at the timing. I think Miss Weiss said something about like this 90%, 60%. What does it mean? But I guess what I want to know is, when is the public part of this? Because we do have a lot of people who live on Park Avenue, live on those side streets. You know, even though we're not going past Virginia right now, there are a lot of people who live down on the end towards Founders Row. What's the public part of this? And I guess that's for staff. It would, because to me, this is one of those things where I think it needs a walking tour and it needs a public meeting. And I don't think we want to wait until we're 90% baked in on it.
Hello, this is Al again. Well, I have two answers to your question. First of all, the public part. Right now, we have a willingness for a public meeting notice that has been sent out to all the neighbors up and down Park and along Maple and Little Falls, all the way down to Great Falls and Broad. So we've sent out flyers to all of those folks to see what interest they do have in a public meeting. And so I'm expecting responses by next week. That's one. Two, you had asked about. Now I've forgotten your first question.
I think it was a public a walkthrough or something like that.
No, it was.
Maybe the speed limit.
Speed limit.
Yes. Lower the speed limit.
Yes, that is under consideration. Actually, that is up to the city to determine what speed that we can have on within the city, within our streets. So that is under consideration by DPW and the planners at this point.
Okay, well, I'll definitely push that with them to consider, because I think the street is already kind of unsafe at the current speed, and if we really open it up and make it more pedestrian friendly, I definitely think we need a lower speed limit.
Okay, Mr. Stevens, your hand's back up. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Just very quickly following up on Commissioner Tietze, might not have mentioned it, but I also support close consideration of a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit on this section. Thanks.
Okay, I know typically it's a work session, but I know we have a few members of the public that sent in letters and also have turned out. And so I guess this would be the opportunity if any members of the public wanted to make any verbal comments to the consultant team and to city staff on this project. I would give you the opportunity at this time if you are so inclined. If you are, just raise your little hand with the in Teams there. Yep. Let's see. I see Andrew. Oh, if I mispronounce your name, I'm sorry. Olison. Go ahead.
You got it. Thanks for the time to speak tonight and bending the rules a little bit to do that. Really encouraged by the discussion here, and thank you for having me. So I come tonight as a member of Bike Falls Church, the community group that's focused on making bicycling and other micromobility a normal, safe, and low-stress option for transportation in the city for people of all ages and abilities. I'm also a member of CACT, but my comments tonight are not reflective necessarily of the views of that committee. First of all, I just want to say I'm thrilled that this group endorsed the Prioritizing Bicycles memo that CACT wrote, and I'm really encouraged by the questions tonight. I think this gives me a lot of hope for the future of bicycling in Falls Church. This group, I think, is really at the front lines of that. Almost every project on your agenda affects bicycling. Founders Road 2 affects the bike routes on Ellison and West. One City Center in the roundabout affects the bike routes on South Maple and Annandale. West Falls, the project includes this active transportation study that doesn't really seem to factor in connections to the city. The subdivision now off the agenda could turn sort of a de facto bike lane into a sidewalk, was the original proposal. And then, of course, Park Avenue tonight. I appreciate all the questions asked. I looked through the design documents, and the word bicycle, bicyclist only appears once in a list of different modes of transportation. So it doesn't look like there was any real serious consideration, at least in the written document. And in the discussion today, in the original presentation, same thing. There were like one or two mentions. The design best practices for bicycles, as published by the National Association of City Transportation Officials, have evolved a lot since this project was first envisioned. As I was looking through documents, the drawings cite 30 mile an hour speeds, which I know we hope to change, and 5,500 vehicles a day of traffic on Park Avenue by 2040. NACTO's guidance would say that requires a protected bike lane to be suitable for users of all ages and all abilities. Other things like the bulb outs in discussion, those will permanently remove the ability to put separated bike lanes on Park, on Little Falls, and on North Maple, which may be the decision we want to make. We should face into those bulb outs have permanent, basically, implications for bicycling, not on just Park, but on other routes. It's also, I think, been helpfully pointed out tonight that we shouldn't just assume that dedicating public space for the storage of private vehicles trumps the safety and accessibility for people who can't necessarily afford or choose not to use a car to get around. We have a choice to make here, and I think that merits some public discussion. And indeed, the grant materials I read, at least, and the bike master plan call out this as being a critical place in the city to shift node share towards bicycles. It's in the heart of our city, and we need to make this street safe and accessible for people who want to use bicycles, regardless of their age or abilities. So this is families, school-age children, riding with their friends by themselves, retirees. It's not, it's for everybody. And to close my comments, I would like to just share a brief reading from the Bicycle Master Plan, Section 4, which was adopted by the City Council in July of 2015. I'll leave out a few phrases for brevity. And I think, Mr. Puentes, your comments tonight reflect the spirit of this requirement, which I had not yet seen anything on any of the recent projects to touch on this. The master plan says, when a bicycle route passes through an area of some other project, the following steps will be taken. 1, the city staff will evaluate existing conditions, including traffic volumes, traffic speeds, and on-street parking utilization. 2, city staff will brainstorm concepts to improve safety for people traveling by bicycle while maintaining access for all street users. 3, city staff will present the options to the public at a community workshop. During the workshop, city staff will present the data collected in step 1 and the concepts developed in step 2. City staff will then discuss with meeting participants the options presented and get their feedback on the concepts. And step 4, the city manager will review the options developed and the public feedback and make the final determination on the type of facility to provide. I hope you all continue to play a part in making sure that public review and engagement of bicycle facilities happens for Park Avenue and other projects. And thank you for your engagement on this topic and all of your time on this and everything else.
Great. No, thank you for that. Okay. Anyone else attending the meeting that would like to comment on this? If not, I think we'll wrap it up. It was a good discussion. I mean, I see Mr. Duncan has popped his hand up. Go right ahead.
Hey, sorry, be slow pushing the button. I just wanted to speak for a second to Tim's question about moving the farmers market away from City Hall. I think one rationale that I've heard is that the patrons of the farmers market don't often have occasion to patronize the bricks and mortar businesses down along the main streets, and that one benefit of moving farmers market closer to them would be that there'd be more synergy between the Saturday business that walks in and the bricks and mortar stores that are there. So just one other rationale for looking at that as an option. Thank you.
No, thank you, Phil. And that, I mean, I would kind of echo that. I would also just, agree that it's crowded. I think that, if you've been to certain farmers markets that are laid out in a little bit more, a linear fashion, I think it's, people like to kind of stroll up and then come back. And the way it is today, you're kind of, you're jostling, to get around people, especially on nice, as we're heading into the springtime when the farmers market tends to probably be the busiest spring and summer. And we've all been there probably on days when it's crowded and it's just, it can be a little bit difficult to maneuver, and people have strollers and, whatever. So I think that having it out on the street, I could see some benefit to that, to having more room, having, the ability to have more vendors and, really grow it. It's already a destination, but so I kind of think that's a neat idea. And I know the parking issue that Mr. Stevens brought up is not insignificant, but I think, right, freeing up some space at City Hall and other places, things like the library, I think folks, can hopefully, manage, during those Saturday mornings. And, but yeah, I think that's actually kind of a neat idea. All right. Well, if there's no other additional words of wisdom from anybody, we'll close the discussion for now. I know these are the 30% plans. I don't know if Mr. Fuller, this will be back before us again in for another update at some point. I forget how Paul has described, checking in on some of these projects. I think it might come back one more time. Is that right, Paul, Mr. Fuller, or is this it for us?
I believe it comes back at 90%.
That's what I thought. Okay, so okay, so we will look forward to seeing that. Hopefully, our comments were helpful, and I think they accurately kind of portray the consensus of this group. And I know you're balancing competing interests on any project like this, and so there's sometimes some difficult decisions that need to be made. But I do hope you'll take some of the comments about bikes and some of those other issues into consideration as you continue to refine the design and work through the engineering. Okay, so moving right along from that takes us to item 8, which is information items. Are there any planning commissioner reports that the folks would like to share from the last few weeks? Other than getting very large increases in our real estate assessments in the mail, which I don't know if that's proper, if it's an appropriate forum for that discussion. But anyway, let's see, I don't know if Mr. Prentice, was your hand up first? Go ahead.
I just wanted to mention I took the Virginia Planning Commission certification course over the last couple of months. I think some other folks have done that. It actually was really interesting. I thought that I've been on the commission so long, what can I learn? But it's a big state. There's an awful lot going on, and it was a very educational course. And if folks haven't done it, I'd encourage you to do it. I learned an awful lot. Thanks to the city for helping me get that.
Neat. Yeah, no, I've heard mostly positive feedback from folks who have done that. So that's great.
Yeah, I found it a great experience. And did you get the speech that the City of Falls Church is unique? A lot of people get that speech where like your code is different than everyone else's in Virginia.
I was really surprised. There was a lot that was very different.
Yeah.
And not just the way we do them, again, makes me very grateful for the staff. I mean, we have a tremendous staff here, and just, hearing from some other places that are so constrained, that are just, and bigger places that are really, really fast growing. It is very unique what we do here, and because it is so small and all that. And then hearing from the very, very rural counties who have just no staff capacity to do anything. I feel really bad that some of these commissions are almost helpless. So we're very lucky in a lot of ways, but it's definitely unique for the rest of the state, for sure.
Very good. Mr. Stevens, go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple of points on the EDA meeting that I attended last evening. It was a 2.5-hour meeting, but I won't go over everything that they talked about, but there are a couple of things that are relevant to us, I think. One of them has to do with an update on the wayfinding signs that have gone up around the city. The EDA members like the looks of the signs, but they've had concerns with the placement in sidewalks, which apparently was a surprise.
Yeah.
Fortunately, our Department of Public Works has been out adding sidewalk expansions to maintain the sidewalk width, but their attitude last night was lesson learned. So the other thing I wanted to mention was there was a good discussion on the T-zone, the transition zone issue that we've talked about a little bit here, and they got into in a lot more depth, I thought, last night, also following up on the city council discussion on Monday evening. So this is an item that we anticipate will come back to us at some point. So I guess it's good for us to kind of keep an eye on it. Right now, it seems like there's interest on the part of especially council member Leon, who wants a hybrid approach, such that parcels that are larger within the transition zone that's under consideration would continue to follow the special exception process that applies to the other major projects. However, the applications on smaller T-zones could proceed under some kind of a by right approach. So that's something that council members have discussed. I think there seemed to be some interest on that on the part of the EDA. So we'll see how that develops. So, but anyway, those were two items that I thought were of interest to us, and that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Yeah, I also noted some of the items just on the EDA stuff that, yeah, a couple of the signs they highlighted that were problematic, like the one in front of the Kaiser Garage on Park, and a few others where, yeah, I don't know what they were thinking by putting it not necessarily smack dab in the middle, but it's pretty significant obstruction. So yeah, hopefully they can. I know they're trying to put some extra concrete in to try to, get and make sure that folks can get around. But yeah, that was interesting. Certainly the design of the signs are nice. It's a nice update and change. I know I noted. I traded some emails with city staff on some of the wording. Like I know, they kind of put the library, the community center, and the city hall under the umbrella term of government center, like GOVT center. I don't know if folks have noticed that. And I think most folks are intelligent enough to understand what that means. But I'd never heard us refer to our civic buildings as the government center. I know Fairfax County calls their center that name, and not that folks would confuse the two, but just I'd never heard us use that. So I just made the point of trying to be consistent in what we call things. I don't think our comprehensive plan kind of refers to that part of town as the government center. But now the signs, there are several signs around town directing you to the government center. So I made the point that, and I think they were trying to they have limited space on the sign. They wanted to highlight several different destinations, city, public destinations in that area. And so that was the term they came up with, but, they're so visible, ironically, a lot more people are going to read those signs driving by, on Broad Street every day than would ever, read things that maybe are adopted in the comp plan. And so it's significant what's on there. And so we should try to be consistent. It was kind of my main point. Not that I really had a huge objection to what they called it, but that just is one thing that stood out to me, in anytime you put up signage like that. So anyhow, but at this point, I think it's up there, and They've kind of adopted that as the way they're going. But I thought that was something that in the future they should try to work with the rest of the city when they're doing something like that, to make sure that that we're all playing from the same playbook. So anyhow, okay. Anybody else have something they wanted to share as far as planning commissioner reports? If not, then I will, I guess, throw it over to Mr. Fuller for the director's report.
Thank you. Good evening. So included in your informational items and under the director's report, you got a number of CIP updates courtesy of Cindy Messer, Deputy City Manager. And obviously the Planning Commission took action, made their final recommendations on this on March 16th on the CIP. The city manager presented this to council on March 28th. So a copy of that was attached and part of as well as the manager's presentation. In addition, there was a few changes after your recommendation to the pay-as-you-go capital expenditure modifications. Those were highlighted there. And then additional revision was in the property yard CIP project. There was a reduction in funding there. So anyway, those updates were provided to you. In addition, there was a informational item on the recent NPR story highlighting national housing shortage, which includes density restrictions in local zoning laws. And, as you mentioned, related, the city council is continuing discussion on T-zones and multifamily housing and town housing as part of that discussion as well. In addition, we put together a nice graphic on the West Falls project, and it has it's very informative in a single graphic, and so we provided that to you as an informational item. Finally, I would say that for our upcoming schedule, we're a little light in April and early May, but we do have work sessions scheduled on April 20th on the East End Small Area Plan, and that would be work session number 2. And then following in May, we have the West Falls Church SCSP Senior Housing work session on that. So that is an amendment that's proceeding that was anticipated under the original SCSP approval. That's all the items I have to highlight tonight. If there's any questions, I'm available. Otherwise, I turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Fuller. I know the West Falls project just gets there. They miss us and they want to keep on coming back and giving us more changes and updates and reasons to come and visit with us again. So we'll look forward to seeing that team come back again in May. All right, let's see. That brings us to correspondence. We had a few letters. Some of them were just, related to the 1001 Lincoln, which we deferred, from Mr. Olson and Mr. Moffett. Mr. Olson also provided a letter on the Park Avenue, Great Streets. We also received a letter from David Bloomgarden, as well as Sam Butler. So folks had those, and I know Mr. Olson was here tonight. Some others were as well. We also received a letter from Joyce Migdale on the Founders. Actually, we were copied on it. I guess it was the City Council on the Founders Row projects. And of course, just late breaking correspondence was Commissioner Comont, who was nice enough to send over some of her comments on the items tonight, since she was not going to be able to join us. She's getting up early to go to Costa Rica in the morning, and so just in the midst of all her preparation, she sent over some comments. So we appreciate that. Let's see. Oh, Ms. Weiss, I noticed your hand just went up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on the director's report on the Planning Commission's comments on the CIP. And I know those recommendations were for future CIPs. I guess I'm just wondering, was there any discussion of those recommendations with City Council, if you know Mr. Fuller? And if not, what is the process for integrating those questions and feedback in future?
I did not participate in those meetings to date, so I can ask Paul to provide an update at the next Planning Commission Director's Report.
Thanks.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Well, oh, Mr. Stevens. I keep on missing those orange hands. All right, go ahead. Oop, you're muted. You're muted, Tim.
Try that now. Sorry. In partial answer to Commissioner Weiss's question, Cindy Nestor did highlight at least our request for future funding in her report to City Council, but obviously, wasn't the time for them to take it up. But I think it'd be a good idea for us to maybe occasionally remind Council of our thoughts on that going forward. Maybe when we have a review from time to time of the CIP projects, that would be a good opportunity to do that. So, yeah, just one quick item I wanted to mention on Mr. Olison's letter, not with respect to the 1001 Lincoln Avenue, but the issue that he raised about placement of bike facilities on constrained streets. It might be good for staff to kind of educate us at some point, especially if it sounds like we're a little bit lighter on some of the upcoming meetings, as to what situations or what opportunities do we have in constrained streets to expand bike infrastructure. I got a little bit of a hint from that from Mr. Stoddard, but there may be some other aspects to our code that would at least let us know what options are available, rather than just simply concluding in all instances that there's not room for bike facilities and therefore just, not consider it. So that would be a request to staff. Thanks.
All right, noted.
Okay. All right. So I went through the letters that we received, and so that brings us to the end of our agenda for tonight. It was a relatively light meeting after we lost one of the items, but I don't think anyone's going to complain about that. Oh, Mr. Duncan, those orange hands, I keep on missing them. Go ahead, Mr. Duncan.
Nope. I just put it up. Just since you all did so much work on the Broad and Washington project, want to make sure you mark on your calendar that their groundbreaking ceremony is Friday, April 29th. I think it's 10:30 in the morning. So those of you who did lots of heavy lifting, we appreciate your work, and come and, have a glass of champagne or whatever they serve at 10:30 in the morning. Also, you may have seen in the news, and I don't have a lot of, unique insight on this, but the announcement from Virginia Tech, Tuesday, I guess it was yesterday, that the deal is going forward to create a institute for construction, modern construction, green construction techniques in conjunction with HIT Contracting and Virginia Tech, using the land on which the grad center now sits. So there'll be more information coming out about that, particularly the financial aspects of it. I think the manager said today they would have something publicly to say about that, but it's a good deal for the city, and it's a good deal for our partners. It ties in with our development, West Falls, and with what the county's doing near the metro, and it should be good for the environment too, because the things that they're espousing there are going to be, useful in construction projects all across the world, hopefully. So I just wanted to flag that.
No, that's great, Mr. Duncan. Actually, I had heard something about that, but no, that is exciting. That's an exciting announcement. Absolutely. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of our agenda. For anybody who has kids or is taking off next week when schools are out, hopefully people relax a little bit and enjoy. And if you celebrate Easter or Passover, enjoy those holidays too. And that brings us to the end. So if there's nothing else for the good of the cause, I will call this tonight's meeting adjourned, and we'll see everybody on April 20th. So take care, everybody.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye.